so often.
So, right this moment, as you're about to listen to me, just turn your attention to who's listening. So, as you're looking at me, turn your attention to who's looking. That's you. Okay. That you has always existed. It was there when you were a baby. It was there, a different body, different mind. It was there when you were a teenager. Different body, different mind. It's there now. And actually, if you stay with it, without anyone explaining to you, you'll realize that it's that timeless being in which time is born. Time is just the movement of thought. Time is the movement of thought that creates a subject-object split. Me, Deepak, Eckhart, okay, all of you. That's a thought. That's a thought. And it is the movement of thought is not in observer in the midst of time-bound observation. So as Eckhart said, you can spend your whole life studying scripture and spend your whole life in various practices. And it does help, it takes time for a fruit to ripen, but then one day it falls. And the falling can be quite sudden, as in your case it was. Transcendence is simply going beyond the subject-object split, which is artificial. It's not real. Nature and the universe is a single process. So the subject-object split is an artificial split. And it is the cause of every single problem that we know. So I come from a tradition which is called Vedanta, which you referred to when you mentioned Sri Ramana Maharshi. And Buddha came many years later and actually did refine in his own language the teachings of Vedanta. But in the Vedanta there are what are called the 5 kleshas. The klesha is a Sanskrit word which means the cause of suffering. So the 5 kleshas are, number 1, not knowing who you are. Number 2, the addiction and the craving for permanence in a world that is inherently impermanent. Number 3 is the fear of impermanence. Number 4 is identifying with your self-image instead of yourself. What Eckhart was saying, all the labels. So all the labels, all the definitions, all the evaluations, all the judgments, all the ideas, all the concepts that have come from conditioning, parents, your parents, your siblings, your culture, religion, history, economic conditions, all these things are collected and then identified with, and that becomes the self-image, the conditioned mind. So that's the fourth klesha. And the fifth klesha is the fear of death, is the fear of the unknown. It's the fear that actually is the basis of all religion, at least institutionalized religion, capitalizes on the fear of death. And in a way, all fear is the fear of death in disguise. Because what is the fear of death? It's, as I said, the fear of the unknown, but it's also the fear of, I'm trying to hold on to something that's not going to be there in the next moment. Okay? Because in the real world, we do not have objects. In the real world, objects do not exist. That's a perceptual artifact. Okay? There's only process. Only process. A simple way of saying this is that there are no nouns, only verbs. The universe is a verb. It's an activity. And being an activity, it never stops. Okay, so when, even as you're looking at me or yourself, your body or your mind, your body is constantly changing. Actually, even scientifically, the body that you have right now is not the body that you walked in with a little while ago. Because you're breathing, you're thinking, you're taking in information from the world, you have relationships, you eat, you eliminate. All these processes are constantly the flux of your physical body. So, as I said, the body you walked in with is not the body that you have right now. And of course, in less than a year, every single atom in your body has been replaced, recycled. You don't have the same body you had as a kid, as a baby, as a teenager. So if you think you're your body, you have a little bit of a dilemma. Which one are you talking about? And if you think you're your mind, you also have a dilemma because the mind is changing all the time. And so here we go, bamboozled by the idea that things exist. Things don't exist. Only process exists. Nouns are conventions of language. They are not facts of reality. It's a language convention, but there's no noun. Not even this microphone is not a noun. It has a little longer shelf life, though, than the body and the mind. But there are no nouns. So all the suffering comes from nouns, things, which don't exist. Okay. So we go over those 5 kleshas, not knowing who you are, trying to fix the flux, which won't be fixed, afraid of the flux, identifying with ideas instead of who you are, ideas about yourself, as you said, and the fear of death. And the great teaching of the Vedanta is that all these 5 causes of suffering are contained in the first cause. And that is not knowing you who you are. Confusing yourself with a socially induced hallucination that actually doesn't exist. And the key, therefore, is who am I? I mean, Sri Ramana Maharshi spent 20 years in silence, and if people asked him a question, no matter what the question was, he would say, who's asking the question? And sometimes he would say, not only who's asking the question, but who's the who that is asking the question. And when you say, who am I, then you could also ask yourself, who's asking, who am I? And if you go a little bit deeply into that, you'll come to the place that Eckhart was talking about. That who is asking the question is a transcendent being that is neither the subject of experience nor the object of experience. So very frequently we say, I'm the observer, but even that is not correct. Okay? The observer and the observed, me and the other, simultaneously co-arise as the movement of thought. The real you is neither the observer nor the observed, but in which both the observer, the subject, and the object of experience simultaneously arise and simultaneously subside. And they're doing so in every moment. That's the flux. Okay, it's a flux that is constantly creating a subject and object. But the real being is neither the subject or the object. It's where the subject and object arise like waves on the ocean and subside. So before a wave arises, it's water. As a wave, it's water, and when it subsides, it's water. It doesn't lose its wateriness. And that's being. You are the being in which thought arises and subsides. Now that thought can have many qualities, okay? These qualities of thought are referred to in the consciousness literature, they're referred to as qualia. Now, everybody has heard these days, thanks partly to my obsession with quanta, okay? Quanta. What is quanta? It means quantity. Okay, so quantum physics is the study of quantities of units of mass and energy. It's the smallest indivisible unit of information and energy is a quanta. But remember, quanta are units of measurement. Qualia, on the other hand, are units of thought or qualities of consciousness. And there are usually just 4 of them. Anytime you have any experience, you're either experiencing a sensation somewhere, or you're experiencing an image, or a feeling, emotion, or a thought. Dan Siegel, who's a great friend of ours, is a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA. He says he uses an acronym, SIFT, S-I-F-T. Every experience that you have is either a sensation, or an image, or a feeling, or a thought. All of perceptual experience, all of cognitive experience, or any experience is actually just consciousness and its qualities. Okay, so right now I'm experiencing you as image and sensation in my body, in my consciousness. I experience my own body like that. I experience you like that. Sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts are occurrences in consciousness of consciousness. So even though I see this as mine and your body as different than mine, actually what I'm experiencing as you and what I'm experiencing as my body are just sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. And the whole universe is nothing other than that. Consciousness experiencing itself as the subject and the object, but both the subject, the individual subject, and the individual object are movements of consciousness within consciousness. Okay, so that's why the great sayings of the great rishis, they say, I'm not in the world is in me. I'm not in the body is in me. I'm not in the mind is in me. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, when he's talking to Arjuna, he says, Prakritim swam vashtbhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create again and again. It's the mechanics of how we create our experience of the body, we create our experience of the mind, and we create our experience of the world. If we totally understand that and come back to what Eckhart was saying, that you can't find this presence by looking for it, because it's the one that's looking. Okay? You can't find consciousness by looking for it, because consciousness is the one that's looking. You know, in my field, as a person who's trained in neuroscience, biology, endocrinology, today there's a lot of interest in consciousness as a brain phenomenon, because that's how we are trained. We think consciousness is a perceptual object, but where is the brain experience? When you think about the brain, where is that experience? In consciousness. When you look at a brain as a perceptual object, that's also in consciousness. So consciousness is prior to brain. Okay? Even the experience of the brain is, the perceptual experience of the brain is a qualia. It's a quality of consciousness within consciousness. So coming back to what he was saying, is all this neuroscience that we're doing, which is fun, a lot of fun to do, it's very inferential, but we will never understand consciousness by looking at a brain or through neuroscience. Why? Because only consciousness can know consciousness. Only consciousness can understand consciousness. Only consciousness can experience consciousness. Any neuroscience validation of consciousness is inferential. It's not direct. Direct is the presence, this moment. So when I started, I said, as you're listening to me, turn your attention to who's listening. Or as you're looking at me, just turn your attention to the space between you and me. Presence is always there. It gets overshadowed, as Eckhart was saying, by the furniture. You know, Rumi has a very beautiful poem. He says, who am I in the middle of all this thought traffic? Because there's the center of being in which all the traffic is happening. And we are obviously identifying ourselves with the furniture and the traffic instead of this presence around which the traffic is being generated as a result of self-interaction. The internal dialogue, as Eckhart was saying, speaking to yourself. And that never stops, because we're so influenced by the quality of awareness which is always looking out there for ultimately what is called happiness or fulfillment. Okay, get the right job, I'll be happy. Get the right person, I'll be happy. Get a lot of money, win the lottery, I'll be happy. Get good health, I'll be happy. But realize what Eckhart said earlier, all that is thought. Okay, all that is thought. If I do this. So before the thought arises, you're already happy. And after the thought subsides, you're exactly where you started from. Okay? Before a thought arises, you were at peace. Then the thought arose, then you did everything to fulfill that outcome of that thought, which we call desire. And at the end, you were back where you started from. Okay. Just like before the wave arises, it's the ocean, and after the wave subsides, it's back into the ocean. So that makes it very obvious that happiness or joy is the starting point. It's also the ending point. You know, what's that poem, T.S. Eliot, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from. At the end of our exploring is to arrive where we started from and know the place for the first time. So what Eckhart was saying is, you know, instead of searching, just actually go back to where you started from. It's a journey without distance. And when you realize that it's a journey without distance, you turn the quality of your awareness to being present. Now, it's very interesting. We can say this many times, and you know, you can hear this, and you can go out, and then you get distracted. You get distracted. And then something happens at some point where you realize that you don't need to be distracted. You can be the timeless being in the midst of time-bound activity. You can be the hub around which the whole universe arises and subsides. Because the whole universe, by the way, is nothing but sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts within consciousness. Okay, so there's a very important Mahavakya. Mahavakya means big idea, and it's still an idea till you experience it in Sanskrit. Aham Brahmasmi. Aham means I am, Brahmasmi, the universe. Because that's the only identity we have. We are the totality of the universe, the totality of the universe, as the continuum of space-time events now. But that space-time events, the continuum, is just a flux. It's coming and going, coming and going. So we go back to the fifth klesha, the fear of death. People say, where do I go when I die? Okay. Let me ask you a question just now. What did you have for lunch today? What did you have for lunch? Salad? Where did you have lunch? Okay. Now, as I'm asking you a question, the memory is coming, right? And you can experience it as a sensation, image, feeling, or thought, right? Where was that before I asked you the question? Where was that experience before I asked you the question? Now, you know, traditional neuroscientists will say, it was in my brain, but I work with the best neuroscientists, my colleague, collaborators, Rudy Tanzi at Harvard, the chief neuroscientist and geneticist at Mass General Hospital. I said, Rudy, next time you have a conference, and he had 150 of the best scientists. And I said, ask them, where is memory stored in a cellular level? Guess what? Not one of them could answer. Okay. We know that when I asked you that question, and before you said salad, that there was a memory somewhere, but we can't find it in the brain. Can't find it in the brain. Do you remember the house you lived in when you were a teenager? Can you see it now? So what are you seeing? You're experiencing sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, because those memories are associated with other memories. If I go inside your brain, do you think I'll find a picture of your house? Or do you think there's some neural network where there is salad. So what happened? When I asked you the question, a sensation, image, feeling, thought arose from consciousness, and then it subsided in consciousness. And that consciousness is transcendent. It doesn't exist in space-time. So where do we go when we die? Where that salad was before I asked you the question. Okay? We don't go anywhere because we are there all the time. Okay? In fact, every thought comes from there. Every memory comes from there. Every desire comes from there. Every bit of imagination comes from there. Insights, intuition, imagination, creativity, choice, all comes from there. And we have to be there in order to retrieve it. You retrieved it from your transcendent self. And being transcendent, it's not a space-time event. But as you actualized it, then there was a little space-time. Okay? Ramana Maharishi, when he was dying, people said, "We are going to miss you." He said, "But where am I going?" Okay? What we call the physical world is a quality of awareness within awareness. What we call the mental world is a quality of awareness within awareness. What we call the universe is a quality of awareness within awareness. And if you can just anchor yourself in that little space, the openness that Eckhart was saying, it's your ticket to freedom. It's the ticket to freedom. Why? Because it's the you that never dies. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, fire cannot burn it. It's eternal, it's unborn, because birth is a space-time event. It doesn't die, because death is a space-time event. A space-time event is part of the flux. So I think that's all I really want to say. Okay? Now, just 1 minute. You know, we do these retreats because sometimes people haven't sat down or been quiet for a long time, and it's almost impossible for them to be present, so the retreat helps in taking you there. In fact, I do retreats myself in silence. So about 2 years ago, I took the opportunity to go to a monastery in Thailand, in the north of Thailand, and we had a very interesting routine over there. Okay, and the routine was that first of all, we shaved our head and our eyebrows, and we were barefoot, and so it was, you know, everybody looked the same, and there was no social mask. Secondly, we had to go begging. It wasn't called begging, it was called the alms round, to find our food every day. And then, you know, people were so generous that we came back as if we had gone shopping to Whole Foods. And then we shared our meal, and 1 meal a day, and the rest of the time was spent in silence and observing impermanence. Because, you know, you soon realize that everything you're looking at is this flux, it's impermanent. And it had a very dramatic effect on all of us, because it threw us in the present moment in a very interesting way. And so when we were leaving, and the abbot, the senior abbot who was the head of the monastery, is about half my age, you know, and we were in silence most of the time, but, you know, in the evenings we had like 2 hours where we could talk to him, and he would ask me questions about quantum physics. And I realized he knew everything. There was nothing I couldn't tell him he'd never read a book, he'd never learnt mathematics or anything, but he had the experience that it wasn't difficult to explain to him what I knew intellectually. And on the day we were leaving, we were all in his presence, and he had a very gracious presence, just like Eckhart has. And he left us with two things, and I want to leave you with those two things, okay? The first is, and this is both scientific insight and real insight, okay? There are no boundaries in the universe. Every boundary is conceptual. In reality, there are no boundaries. We create them, just like we create latitude and longitude for purposes of convenience. So if I say, meet me on 56th and Broadway on Tuesday at 6 p.m., now we've created an agreement for a boundary. But in reality, there are no boundaries at all. And the second thing, which you already know, is the present moment is the only moment that never ends. Okay, the situations and circumstances around the present moment will change, but the moment won't change. Because it's timeless, it's transcendent, it's eternal. So I'll leave you with what my abbot said to me. He said, the most important time in your life is now. The most important person in your life is the one you're with now. The most important activity in your life is the one you're involved with now. And if you do that, the unknown will become known to you. The unknown is actually known only in the present moment. And that ultimately will lead to the conquest of death. Because death happens in time. Only that which is born dies, but that which is never born cannot die. Okay? Thank you. I'm going to invite Eckhart. Please welcome. So, by the way, thank you. By the way, in the spiritual literature and in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they talk about supernormal powers. They're called siddhis. Have you heard the word siddhi? Siddhis are dormant potentials, the ability to see in the future, the ability to experience the past, know previous lifetimes, remote viewing, remote healing. And I'm experiencing a siddhi right now. And it says that Wayne Dyer is in this room. There he is. And you thought I wasn't psychic. So, I'm going to first have a conversation with Eckhart, and then perhaps you can join us for a few moments. Okay, so Eckhart.